Hello and welcome back to the Tech Blackboard. This is our part 8 of our AZ-900 real exam question and answer series. In this part, we are going to cover another 15 power-packed questions from question number 101 to question number 115. Earlier in this series, we have already covered 100 questions split across 7 parts. So if you have missed any of these parts, I would strongly recommend that you go and check out every part of this series because you don't know which question out of these parts will come in your Microsoft exam. So do not miss even a single part. Starting with our question number 101. This one says that which of the following is an example of IaaS or infrastructure as a service. So you can see there are a lot of services given here. For example, compute, storage, networking, security, and many more. Now you have to tell that which one of these fall under the category of infrastructure as a service. The correct answer for this one is all of them. Yes, of course, all of these services fall under the category of infrastructure as a service. So friends, these kind of questions are important in the sense that you at least know what all services fall under which different categories. IaaS, PaaS or SaaS offerings, because there are a lot of questions that come from this area. You can read a lot more about Microsoft infrastructure as a service here on this page from Microsoft. If you will scroll down, you can see all these services which I just showed you in the PPT. So all these services fall under the category of infrastructure as a service. Now let's begin with our question number 102. This one is a yes/no kind of question. So first of all, I will take you through all the statements. Then I will give you the answers. And then finally, I will take you to the Azure portal to show everything in practical. Now let's start with the first statement. The first statement says that from Azure Service Health, an administrator can view the health of all the services in an Azure environment. The correct answer for this one is yes. Yes, you can use Azure Service Health to view all the service related health issues in an Azure environment. It's very important that you know, friends, that when we are talking about Azure Service Health, it's not to be confused by something that can give alerts or through which you can monitor the problems with your own deployed solution. It's not that. For example, let's say you have deployed a data factory and data factory, the pipeline ran into an error. So Azure Service Health, you cannot watch or monitor the logs of that particular pipeline. Okay, so it's not about your application or your services. So what do you use Azure Service Health for? Azure Service Health you use to see the health of all the services and the regions that you are using. Okay, so for example, you can see the outages, the planned maintenance activities, or other health advisories. So this is what Azure Service Health is used for. Moving on with our second statement, it says that from Azure Service Health, an administrator can create a rule to be alerted if an Azure service failed. The correct answer for this one is yes. Moving on with the third statement, we have from Azure Service Health, an administrator can prevent a service failure. The correct answer for this one is no. As I mentioned before, the Azure Service Health is essentially just a window, just a monitor that you can use to see the outages or planned maintenance. So now let me take you to the Azure portal to show you more about Azure Service Health. Now here I am on the Azure portal. Now if you go here and find Service Health, then you can see Microsoft is giving you the suggestion. This is the logo, this heart shape. Then if you click on it, now here on this Azure Service Health page, you can see if there are any problems with the or any outages with the services or the regions that you are using, or if there are any planned maintenance or any health advisories, or for that matter, security advisories as well. The good part is you can also see the health history for all the services and regions that you are currently working with. And then as we saw in the second statement, it asked that whether we can create alerts in Azure Service Health. So here you can see this option which says add service health alert. If you click on this option, so on this page, you have information already filled up. For example, your subscription, the services, the regions. And then on this segment where it says event type, here you can see not only the service issue, you can also select for planned maintenance, you can select health advisories, you can select security advisories. So all of these you can select and build a alert for everything that you want. So I hope with that quick glimpse on Azure portal, you now understand why we have chosen a yes for the first statement and why we chose yes for the second and no for the third one. Now let's move on to question number 103. This one says that you have an Azure environment that contains 10 web apps. To which URL should you connect to manage all the Azure resources? So here you are already given HTTPS and in the end you are given this .com, and in between the two you have been given with two drop down menus, and of these drop downs you have to select one options from each so that the URL is complete. Okay, so one important and interesting thing is that do not get confused by these things, like for example 10 web apps or any other things that Microsoft gave. The crux of the question is that which URL should you hit when you want to access the Azure portal. Okay, so here I am on the Azure portal once again. Now let me open a tab, and in the tab I will try to open the Azure portal. So watch carefully what address or URL I am typing in. So I am typing portal.azure.com, and if I hit the enter, you can see it takes me to the Azure portal because I am already logged in. That's why it just opens my default page. So the correct answer for this question is, so the correct URL becomes https portal.azure.com. Before moving ahead, I just wanted to say that friends, if you're liking my efforts that goes in finding proper Microsoft documentation to justify each answer and giving you explanation for each question, then do encourage me by liking the videos and subscribing to the channel. Your each like will ensure that the videos are reaching to the greater audience. Your comments and feedbacks are very valuable for me, and I make sure to read each one of them and answer them as well. Keep supporting me and I shall bring the very best of the content. Now let's quickly jump to the question number 104. The question says that you plan to extend your company network to Azure. The network contains a VPN appliance that uses an IP address of 121.108.100.1. You need to create an Azure resource that defines the VPN appliance in Azure. Which Azure resource should you create first? To answer, select the appropriate resource in the answer area. Now this can be a little bit of confusing question because you can see there are a lot of options and you must need to understand each of the option in relation to the statement given here. So before answering this question, let me take you to the Microsoft page, and there we will understand in a better way how this setup is done. So now I am on the Microsoft page, and here you can see it says that create a site-to-site VPN connection in Azure portal. Now let's read it out. It says that Azure VPN gateway provides cross-premises connectivity between customer premise and Azure. And if you remember the statement correctly, we are in on-premise and now we want to extend to Azure portal. So it's very important that you understand where are we starting from and where we want to move. So we are starting from on-premise and we are moving to Azure cloud, and that's where we want to set up a site-to-site VPN. So let's understand this diagram, and you can see the network itself is now subdivided into subnets, and then we have this VPN tunnel, a VPN gateway, and then we connect to the cloud. Okay, now the first step it says is local network device. Okay, and then we have public IP address. Now here you can learn how to do this. You first need to create a virtual network, then you have VPN gateway, and then you set up a local network gateway. Keep that in mind. Then we have VPN connection. You verify the connection and then you connect to a virtual machine. It's an interesting page, a long page though, so you have to read it through. But the interesting part where I want you to focus is this one. Okay, so we have here create a local network gateway. So this section says that the local network gateway is a specific object that represents on-premises location, the site, for routing purposes. Here it's important to note that local network gateway is a specific object that represents your on-premise location. Okay, rest you can read on this page. I have just shown you the page, and the links for this page will be provided in the description box as well. So now let's move to the PPT and find out the answer. So as we just saw on the Microsoft page, that the first step towards creating a site-to-site VPN is that we create a local network gateway. And that's exactly the correct answer for this question. So these are important questions from the exam point of view because these are confusing first of all, and then Microsoft can tweak the question. So you need to really understand the question, what are the options given in the question, and how those options fit into building some sort of VPN or a network. So please be very careful when you are reading or doing these kind of questions. Then moving on with our question number 105. This one says that your company plans to move several servers to Azure. The company's compliance policy states that a server named FinServer must be on a separate network segment. You are evaluating which Azure service can be used to meet the compliance policy requirement. Which Azure solution should you recommend? Should you recommend a resource group for FinServer and another resource group for all the other servers? Then the B part is a virtual network for FinServer and another virtual network for all other servers. The option C says a VPN for FinServer and a virtual network gateway for each other server. Option D is one resource group for all servers and resource group lock on FinServer. So which according to you is a correct answer to suit this statement? Now before I answer this question, let me tell you more about network in Azure. So a network in Azure is also known as virtual network. A virtual network can have multiple IP address space and multiple subnets. Now Azure automatically routes the traffic between the subnets within a virtual network. Now the question states that the FinServer here must be on a separate network. Now the only way to do this in networking is to put the FinServer on a different network and then rest of the server on a separate network. So that's the only feasible way through which we can achieve this statement. Thus, the correct answer for this question is option B, a virtual network for FinServer and another virtual network for all the other servers. If you are new to this channel, then let me tell you that I have started to give away the PDF version of these PPTs that I use in my videos. So if you are someone who is looking forward for the PDF version of this PPT that I'm using in part 8, then you have to tell me the answers for the question number 103, 108 and 115. For those who will answer all the questions right, then I will give you the PDF version of this PPT. Coming to the question number 106. This is again a yes/no kind of question. So let's read the first statement. The first statement says Azure Powershell modules can be installed on Mac OS. Now here I am on the Microsoft documentation which talks about Azure PowerShell. In this paragraph you can read that AZ PowerShell module is based on .NET standard and works with PowerShell 7.0.6 LTS and PowerShell 7.1.3 or higher on all platforms including Windows, Mac OS and Linux. It is also compatible with Windows PowerShell 5.1. Thus, as you just saw on the Microsoft documentation page, yes, we can install PowerShell modules on Mac OS? So the correct answer is yes. Then the second statement says that Azure Cloud Shell can be accessed from a web browser on a Linux computer. And the correct answer for this one is yes. Yes, of course, you can access the Cloud Shell from a Linux computer. Friends, I don't have a Linux computer, but I can surely show you how a Cloud Shell or Azure Cloud Shell works. So here I am on the Microsoft Azure portal. So here you can see a small button which looks like a prompt. If you click on this button, then you can see a terminal window is getting open and it says requesting Cloud Shell. So this is exactly the Azure Cloud Shell which you can run from any browser, whether it is on Microsoft Windows or Linux or on Mac OS. Now you can see it's connecting to the terminal. So it just takes a little while and then authentication is done. And then here you have the PowerShell running on your browser. Interesting part to know is that you can run both PowerShell and you can also run Bash as well. Thus, the correct answer is yes. Moving on with the third statement, we have the Azure portal can only be accessed from Windows device. The correct answer for this is no. Azure portal can be accessed from Linux, Mac OS, and Windows, of course. Now let's move to question number 107. The first statement of the question says that all the Azure resources deployed to a resource group must use same Azure region. Simply putting it, the question or the statement is saying that whenever you have a Azure resource group and you have a location attached to it, so all the resources that are deployed under that resource group should also be deployed in same Azure region as your resource group is. Now the correct answer for this statement is no, because the resource group, it can have a different location and the resources inside that resource group can also have different locations. So both can have different location or same location. So there is no restriction or compulsion that all the resources inside the resource group must have the same location as that of the resource group. Now, let me tell you a very interesting fact about resource group. So essentially, resource group, they just contain metadata about the resources it contains. So whenever you create a resource, you have to provide a location. I think that much we all know. So a location is essential whenever we create any kind of resource in Microsoft Azure. Now you must be wondering that if resource can have a different location, as we saw in this statement as well, then why resource group even need a location? So this is a confusion with many people who start working on Azure. So it's a very simple thing. See, the resource group, it just contains metadata. Now you have to store this metadata somewhere. So to store this metadata, you need to give a location to a resource group. That's it. That's the reason why you need to give a location when you are creating a resource group. I hope you like that interesting fact about resource group. Let me know in the comment section if you have more interesting fact about any of the resources of Microsoft Azure. Now let's move to the second statement, which says that if you assign a tag to a resource group, all the Azure resources in that resource group are assigned to the same tag. The correct answer for this one is no. Now to justify the answer, here I am on the Microsoft documentation, which talks more about Azure Resource Manager. And if you scroll down a little, you will reach to a section which talks more about resource groups, and that's what our question is based on. Then a little more scrolling, and then here you will read a section which will be, and now here if you concentrate on this section, it says you can apply tags to resource group. The resources in the resource group do not inherit those tags. So whenever a resource group gets some tags or you apply some tags on resource group, they do not descend to the resources in that resource group. They don't inherit it by default. Coming back to the presentation, the third statement says that if you assign permissions for a user to manage a resource group, the user can manage all the Azure resources in that resource group. The correct answer for this statement is yes. So unlike tags, the tags do not inherit to the other resources in that resource group. But in case of permissions, when you are applying a generic permission to a resource group, then that permission descends to the resources inside that resource group. So the user can definitely manage all the resources in that resource group depending upon the permission that you have given. So for example, if you have given a user a read-only permission, or let's say write permission, or any other permission, the same permission that you have given on the resource group level will also be inherited to all the resources inside that resource group. So keep that in mind. Coming to the question number 108. This one says that a support engineer plans to perform several Azure management tasks by using the Azure CLI. You install the CLI on a computer. You need to tell the support engineer which tools to use to run CLI. Which two tools should you instruct the support engineer to use? Now pay attention, my friends, that you have to use two tools. Sometimes it happens that people just select one option and then move ahead, and they lose a precious 1 mark. So while answering the question, always pay attention how many options you have to choose while answering the question. So the correct answer for this one is command prompt, and the second answer is Windows PowerShell. The other three options that you can see here, Azure Resource Explorer, Windows Defender Firewall, or Network and Sharing Center, they are not even remotely related to running a CLI. Thus, the only correct options are option A and option C. Moving on with our question number 109. This one says that you have an Azure environment. You need to create a new virtual machine from a tablet that runs on the Android operating system. Solution is you use PowerShell in Azure Cloud Shell. Does this meet the goal? Now I want to show you more variations of this same question that you can expect in Microsoft exam, because of course Microsoft keeps changing the pool of question, so they bring more variations in the same question so that they can test you on your knowledge. So let's check out the other variation of the same question. The other variation in question number 110 is shown. The question being the same, the solution however says that this time you use Power Apps portal. Even one more variation is in the question number 111, and this one says that you use Bash in Azure portal. Now which out of these three variations do you think has a correct answer? So let's begin with question number 109. Here we had PowerShell in Azure Cloud Shell. Now in the question number 106, I showed you how to run Azure Cloud Shell from a browser. Now in browser, you can run two modes in Azure Cloud Shell, the one being PowerShell and the other being Bash. And you can run the browser from any operating system, be it Mac OS or Windows or Linux, or for that matter, even Android operating system. It just have to be a browser. In fact, to tell you, I also use sometimes for very small works though, but sometimes I am using the Azure Cloud Shell from my mobile browser. And that's exactly what it asked, Android operating system. So the correct answer for question number 109 is yes. Of course, you can run PowerShell in Azure Cloud Shell. Then moving on with 110, we have Power Apps. The correct answer for this one is no. Now it's interesting to note that Microsoft has given Power Apps here. Now Power Apps is basically, it lets you create business application with little or no code. So do not get confused between Power Apps and PowerShell. Moving on with question number 111, the correct answer is yes. I already told you that you can run both Bash and PowerShell from Azure Cloud Shell. Coming to question number 112, this one says that you plan to map a network drive from several computers that run Windows 10 to Azure storage. You need to create a storage solution in Azure for planned map drive. What should you create? So should you create an Azure SQL database or a virtual machine data disk or file service in Azure storage account or a blob storage in storage account? The correct answer for this question is option C, a file service in a storage account. It's important that you're noting that you are mapping from a network drive. So essentially, we are talking about the on-premise of several computers. And what are we mapping it to? We are mapping it to Azure storage. So from an on-premise network drive, you need to map this drive to a Azure storage. So this is what the requirement is. Now to justify the answer, here I am on the Microsoft documentation, which talks more about Azure Files. Now here you can read that Azure Files offers fully managed file shares in cloud that are accessible via industry standard SMB protocol or NFS protocol. It also says that Azure Files shares can be mounted concurrently by cloud or on on-premise deployment. So it's important that you're noting that it can also be mounted on on-premise deployments. Also, it's good to read this line that it says that Azure Files can be used to completely replace or supplement traditional on-premise file servers or NAS devices. Popular operating systems such as Windows, Mac OS, Linux can directly mount Azure file shares whenever they are in the world. So this means that you can use file service to map a network drive from several computers to Azure storage. Moving on with our question number 113. This one says that your company plans to start using Azure and will migrate all its network resource to Azure. You need to start the planning process by exploring Azure. What should you create first? So should you create a subscription? Should you create a resource group or a virtual network or a management group? The key point to note is what is the service that you will create first? If you have been watching my videos regularly, then I have told this many times that subscription is the thing that is associated or tied up with your billing. So whenever you're creating a Microsoft account, be it a free tier or pay as you go, then the first thing that you create is subscription. Because only once you have created the subscription, your billing starts, and then only Microsoft will allow you to create any other resource. Thus, the correct answer for this question is subscription. Now coming to question number 114, data that is stored in archive access tier of an Azure account. You need to tell how you can access the data in the archive access tier. So can it be accessed anytime using azcopy.exe, or can it only be read by using Azure Backup, or it must be restored before the data can be accessed, or it must be hydrated before the data can be accessed. Before I jump to the Microsoft documentation, it's important that you note that we are talking about archive access tier. So here I am on the Microsoft documentation talking about hot, cold and archive access tier for blob data. Now here you can read more about all the different tiers. We have hot tier, cool tier, and then we have archive tier. If you scroll down this site a little, then you will reach to more details given on archive access tier. Now here in this section, in this paragraph, you can read that while a blob is in archive tier, it cannot be read or modified. To read or download a blob in archive tier, you must first rehydrate it to online tier, either hot or cool. I hope reading through the Microsoft documentation already give you a fair idea of what is going to be the correct option for this question. So the correct answer is that it must be rehydrated before the data can be accessed. Now moving on with our question number 115, which is also our last question for our part 8 on our AZ-900 real exam question and answer series. This one is like a fill in the blanks. This one says Dash is an Apache Spark based analytics service. So which out of these is a Apache Spark based analytics service? Is it Azure Databricks, or Data Factory, Azure DevOps, or Azure Synapse Analytics? The correct answer for this one is Azure Databricks. If you want to read more about Azure Databricks, then here is the Microsoft documentation. The link for this page is also available in the description box. I hope you like another set of 15 questions that we covered in this part 8.
If this video has added any value in your learning, a like and subscribe is highly appreciated. Share this video in your family and friends to spread and expand their learning. Your comments and feedback give me a chance to interact with you, and I look forward for them. We will meet again in our next video. Till then, stay fit, keep learning, and thanks for watching.